quiero también decirle a Robert que es un honor para mí pelear con él. Creo que te merece tu Balón de Oro.
The treble, 55 goals and immortality, was achieved by one man in one season. But the man is about to do the same thing again, but with a different club. But how did he achieve immortality in the year 2020? Well, let's talk about it today. All anyone can talk about is Robert Lewandowski's brilliance at Barcelona. The goals, the leadership, the swagger. He's the complete package, right? A superstar, lighting up La Liga like he's been doing it his whole life. But here's the thing. What if I told you this isn't even his final form? Don't get me wrong, Lewy is still a monster on the pitch, but let's rewind the clock for a second, because before Barcelona, before La Liga defenders started getting nightmares, there was 2020, a year when Lewandowski wasn't just great, he was unfair, a cheat code, the kind of player who made you question if the rules of football even applied to him. Back then, Lewandowski didn't just score goals, he printed them. He was the kind of striker who made the beautiful game feel broken, like a video game where someone accidentally maxed out his stats. And yet, here we are in 2024, hyping it up like he hasn't done all this before. Oh, how quickly we forget. So, let me take you back to that magical year. The year Robert Lewandowski wasn't just the best player in the world, he was the best player in any world. 2020 wasn't just a chaotic year, it was a footballing anomaly. The pandemic brought everything to a halt. Stadiums went quiet, fans disappeared, and matches, once celebrated with deafening roars, were now played in eerie silence. It was football, but not as we knew it. For the first time, the sport's global machine came to a screeching stop. Leagues were suspended, schedules crammed, and the players found themselves walking into a world where every game carried the weight of uncertainty. And when football returned, it wasn't business as usual. It was survival of the fittest. Some teams buckled under the pressure. Injuries surged, morale dipped, and even the biggest names in football looked human for once. The chaos spared no one, except for one man. While others faltered, Robert Lewandowski thrived. He didn't just rise to the occasion, he owned it. Every match was another opportunity, and in a year where everything seemed broken, Lewandowski became the one constant. He was football's answer to chaos, a striker who didn't just adapt, but elevated himself to untouchable levels. With Bayern Munich as his fortress, Lewandowski spearheaded one of the most dominant teams football had ever seen. And let's be clear, this wasn't your average great team. This was a steamroller that flattened everything in its path. By the time the season restarted, Lewandowski had hit a gear no one else could match. His timing, precision, and hunger for goals weren't just unmatched, they were surreal. It didn't matter who he faced or how high the stakes were. For Lewy, every match was another opportunity to prove one thing. He was that guy. But don't just take my word for it. Let's talk about the numbers, because what Lewandowski did that year wasn't just dominance, it was statistical absurdity. In 2020, Robert Lewandowski didn't just put up good stats, he put up video game stats. 55 goals in 47 games. 55 goals! That's not just incredible, that's ridiculous. I mean, the only kind of players who could pull such a stat were the football goats. It's the kind of thing you see in career mode on FIFA when you're playing on easy. But for Lewandowski, this was real. In the Bundesliga, he scored 34 goals in just 31 matches. That's more than a goal per game. And it wasn't like he was padding his stats against weaker teams. Lewandowski didn't discriminate. He scored against Schalke, against Frankfurt, against Dortmund, hat-tricks, crucial late-game goals, statement goals. He delivered every single week. It got to the point where defenders didn't even look surprised anymore. You could see it on their faces. Oh, it's Lewandowski. Of course he scored. And that was just domestic. In the Champions League, he was a beast. Now, if the Bundesliga was Lewandowski's playground, the Champions League was his stage to show the world what he could do. 15 goals in 10 matches. 15! And before you even ask, no, he didn't rely on penalties. These were goals created from pure brilliance. He was scoring headers, volleys, one-touch finishes. You name it, he did it. Chelsea, Barcelona, oh, don't even get me started on that game. Lewandowski was averaging a goal every 81 minutes. That means if you sat down to watch a Bayern game, there was almost a guarantee you'd see him score. Forget if. The real question was when. It wasn't just about volume either, it was about efficiency. Let's talk about expected goals, or XG. For most strikers, XG gives you a good idea of how many goals they're likely to score. But for Lewandowski, he wasn't just meeting those numbers, he was smashing them. It was like he was playing at a level where even the analytics couldn't keep up. Now let's put this into perspective. Messi and Ronaldo have set the gold standard for what greatness looks like in football. Gerd Müller was the original goal-scoring machine. But in 2020, Lewandowski wasn't just competing with them, he was outpacing them. He made Messi and Ronaldo's numbers that season look ordinary. Let me repeat that, ordinary. This wasn't just about breaking records anymore. This was about setting a new standard. Lewandowski's 2020 season was the kind of performance that made you rethink what was even possible for a striker. And you know what makes this even crazier? These weren't just empty numbers. These weren't stat-padding goals in meaningless games. Every single goal mattered. Every single one contributed to Bayern Munich's domination that season. Lewandowski wasn't just a striker, he was the engine driving one of the greatest teams football has ever seen. At this point, it felt like the rules of football didn't apply to him. Defenders couldn't stop him, goalkeepers couldn't save his shots, even luck seemed to be on his side. He was rewriting what it meant to be a world-class forward, and honestly, it was mesmerizing to watch. If the Bundesliga was where Lewandowski flexed his goal-scoring muscles, then the Champions League was where he showcased his ability to dismantle Europe's best teams like they were amateurs. First, let's talk about that game against Spurs. The 7-2 demolition in their backyard. Lewandowski didn't just score twice, he terrorized Tottenham's defense every time he touched the ball. His goals weren't just clinical, they were soul-crushing. By the end, you could practically see the disbelief on the faces of the Spurs players. That night wasn't just about winning, it was a warning to the rest of Europe. Bayern Munich and Lewandowski were coming for the crown. And then came Barcelona. You know exactly which match I'm talking about. The 8-2 massacre. Barcelona, one of Europe's giants, were completely obliterated. And while Lewandowski scored in that game, it wasn't just about the goal. It was his presence that broke their spirit. Every time he got the ball, you could feel the panic in Barca's defense. He was like a magnet for chaos, pulling defenders out of position and opening space for Bayern to riot. By the time it was over, Barcelona wasn't just beaten, they were humiliated. Fans were calling it a historic collapse. And Lewy? He was right at the center of it all. But the Champions League isn't just about big scorelines. It's about winning when it matters most. Fast forward to the final against PSG. Sure, he didn't get on the score sheet that night, but don't let that fool you. Lewandowski was crucial. His movement off the ball, his link-up play, and the way he drew defenders out of position created openings for Bayern's attack. Every PSG defender knew that if they gave him even a moment's space, the game could be over. He was like a shadow looming over their defense for 90 minutes. And when that final whistle blew, Bayern had done it. They were champions of Europe, and Lewandowski had been the driving force behind their campaign. 15 goals in the tournament, the top scorer, the ultimate game changer. Even fans and commentators couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Pundits were running out of superlatives to describe him. This wasn't just domination, it was an exclamation point on one of the greatest individual seasons in football history. And here's the thing, he made it look effortless. But what made 2020 even more special wasn't just what he did on the pitch, it was how he cemented himself as one of the all-time greats. But in this beautiful game, not all things go our way, and this caused one of the greatest pains to Lewandowski because his efforts were not rewarded. But before we talk about that, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, it would help us out. Thanks a lot. Now back to the video. Now after all that, after the goals, the records, the titles, 2020 should have been the year Robert Lewandowski stood at the top of the football world. He'd done everything you could ask for. He led Bayern to a treble, scored 55 goals, and was untouchable on every stage. But here's where the story takes a turn. You know what I'm talking about. The Ballon d'Or, the ultimate individual honor in football. The award that says, yeah, you're that guy. And what happens? It gets cancelled. No Ballon d'Or in 2020. The one year where there was no debate about who deserved it, they just decided not to hand it out. Fans were furious, pundits were speechless, even Messi and Ronaldo knew. It was Levy's year. Messi said it himself, you deserved it. When Messi's giving you the nod, you know it's legit. But the outrage wasn't just about fairness, it was about the fact that Lewandowski had reached a brilliance we may not see again for a long time. And the moment he should have been crowned the best player in the world, stolen. It's a tragedy in the football world. Every great story has one, and for Lewandowski, this was it. But here's one thing, he didn't need that Ballon d'Or to prove anything, because what he achieved in 2020 goes beyond trophies, and that brings us to his legacy. So what's the legacy of Robert Lewandowski's 2020 season? It's simple. He didn't just dominate football, he perfected it. People always say players need a Ballon d'Or to cement their legacy. But let me tell you this, in 2020, Lewandowski didn't need the Ballon d'Or. He had something better, immortality. He became a player we'll talk about for years, who set a standard that might never be reached again. Well, Haaland might, but Lewandowski was the only one who was not rewarded. It felt like the chapter for the Ballon d'Or had closed for Lewandowski, but this season it seems like he might just win it. This season, Lewandowski has been an absolute monster for Barcelona, under the guidance of Hansi Flick, who, let's not forget, knows exactly how to get the best out of him. Levy has been the guy for Barca. In 29 games this season, he's already bagged 28 goals and chipped in 3 assists. Let me say that again, 28 goals in 29 games. That's nearly a goal per game. It's like the man is aging in reverse. Defenders still can't figure him out, and his positioning, it's as if he's reading the game 2 steps ahead of everyone else. And it's not just about the goals. Lewandowski's presence on the pitch is what makes Barcelona tick. He's the glue holding the attack together, the guy you can always count on to turn a half chance into a goal. Whether it's a towering header, a clinical finish, or a moment of pure magic, Levy delivers every single time. It's wild to think about. A player who achieved footballing immortality in 2020 is now writing another legendary chapter. And whether or not the Ballon d'Or finally comes his way, one thing's for sure. Robert Lewandowski isn't just a cheat code, he's the standard by which strikers are measured.